Hello out there, my fellow nerds, and welcome to another comic book review on my channel. This month's video is on the 1994 Green Lantern story known as Emerald Twilight, written by Ron and featuring art by Bill Willingham, Fred Hayes, and Darryl Banks. Emerald Twilight is a story all about grief, showing a hero's struggles facing it, how they try to come to terms with it and overcome it, and well, crash and burn in the process, you'll see. It signified the end of Hal Jordan's tenure as a Green Lantern and the start of Kyle Raynor's. Emerald Twilight begins with Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48, with Hal Jordan on his knees, in the center of a giant crater that was once his home, Coast City. It had been destroyed, along with all of its inhabitants, by the intergalactic warmonger named Mongol. During the events of the Reign of the Superman storyline, Mongol used his ship to launch several sphere-shaped bombs at Coast City that seeded it and created what was essentially a giant engine in its place. This engine would allow Mongol to transform the Earth into a massive mobile spaceship called Warworld. Mongol would be defeated when Hal Jordan used the power of his Green Lantern ring to lift Steel's hammer he had dropped in battle and swung for the fences with it. Despite the awesome visual, Green Lantern standing tall, it didn't change the fact that Coast City was now in ruin, basically a pile of dirt, and that's being generous. Overcome with sadness and grief for the millions of lives lost, many of his close friends and family members, Hal Jordan uses the power of his ring to basically will Coast City back into existence, resurrect it as a light construct, fix any imperfections it might have had, rewrite its entire history, and in many ways, play God. Unfortunately for Hal, his creation only lasts for so long, as his power ring's energy gets depleted. Shortly afterwards, Hal is confronted by a hologram projection of one of the Guardians of the Universe that commands him to return to Oa for disciplinary action for violating one of the most important rules of the Green Lantern Corps, to never use the power of their rings for personal gain. Enraged, Hal drains the hologram of its energy and says that the Guardians are not gonna like him when he gets to Oa. His intention is to use the vast energy of the planet's central power battery to recreate Coast City permanently. The Guardians of the Universe attempt to stop Jordan by sending several Green Lanterns to intercept him on his way to Oa, but Hal cannot be reasoned with, and the sheer force of his will easily overpowers that of his fellow Lanterns. With each victory, Hal steals more power rings, which augment his abilities even further and make him more brutal in combat. The Guardians even send Hal's close friend and teacher Kilowog to stop him, but much like all the rest, he is defeated and left for dead. On Oa, the Guardians make one final desperate attempt to stop Jordan by releasing the former Green Lantern, Sinestro, from his prison inside of the Central Power Battery. Hal promises his foe that their rivalry will end here, one way or another. Sinestro convinces Jordan to remove his extra power rings. After all, he'll want to defeat him, knowing that it was a fair fight. The two Lanterns beat the ever-loving piss out of each other. The battle is hard-hitting, brutal, and Sinestro is left a bloody mess. But simple victory is not enough for Jordan, and he does the unimaginable. He takes a page out of Zack Snyder's playbook and proceeds to kill Sinestro by snapping his neck. With Sinestro out of the way, Hal proceeds to the Central Power Battery, but is stopped once more, again by Kilowog, who tries to reason with his friend, save what little is left of him before it's too late. Unfortunately, Jordan proceeds to kill Kilowog as well, with a powerful blast from his ring, telling his fallen comrade that he has crossed the line already, that there is no turning back. Hal enters the Central Power Battery to absorb all of its energy. This causes it to explode, and he emerges wearing a new armored costume. Before the power battery is destroyed, however, the Guardians of the Universe sacrifice themselves by transferring all of their power to the Guardian Ganthet, so he can not only survive, but the entire Green Lantern Corps as well. Ganthet creates a ring and teleports himself to Earth, where, in desperation, selects Kyle Raynor to be the next Green Lantern, the last Green Lantern, so no pressure. The events of Emerald Twilight do end there. It was only 3 issues long, focusing on Hal Jordan's fall from grace and Kyle Raynor being appointed the new Green Lantern of Sector 2814. But I will go into some of the aftermath of this story, because those of you out there unfamiliar with DC might be interested to know just what the hell happened with Hal Jordan following this story. You see, when Hal took all of the energy from the central power battery on Oa, we witnessed the debut of the evil entity known as Parallax, without even knowing it at the time. Parallax is one of several entities found within the emotional electromagnetic spectrum, an energy field and spectrum of light that fuels the emotions of all sentient beings, and is the power source of all the Lantern Corps. Parallax is the embodiment of fear and represents the color yellow within the emotional spectrum, the mascot essentially of the Yellow Lantern Corps, or Sinestro Corps, whatever you want to call them. In the 6-issue series Green Lantern Rebirth from 2004 to 2005, it was revealed that Jordan had been possessed by Parallax during the events of 1994's Emerald Twilight. Parallax had been retroactively added into that story. Parallax had been the name Jordan had given himself once he became one with the central power battery's energy, but now there was more context to that name, an even stronger explanation to it than there was before. Parallax had reached out to Hal Jordan through his ring and manipulated him when he was at his weakest, both mentally and emotionally, following the destruction of Coast City. Hal had become susceptible to his own fear and paranoia, and Parallax's influence over him is what caused Hal to act so violent during the events of Emerald Twilight. When he destroyed the central power battery, he released Parallax that had been imprisoned within it. Fear and willpower oppose each other in the emotional spectrum, which is why the Guardians of the Universe were able to build up their combined energies to weaken Parallax and trap it. Anywho, Hal Jordan, as Parallax, would become one of the biggest villains in the DC universe at that time, playing the role of the central antagonist within the 1994 crossover 0 Hour. In it, he would plan on destroying the entire time stream, everything that ever was and will be, to start over with a clean slate, recreate the universe the way he wanted it to be. Much like Crisis on Infinite Earths nearly a decade prior, the purpose of 0 Hour was to restructure the DC universe yet again, fix the complicated timeline and messy continuity, remove some elements, add in some new ones, have it act as a reset button for the writers essentially. Emerald Twilight is one of my favorite Green Lantern stories. It's not as good as Blackest Night, I think that one is still my personal favorite GL story, crossover even, but Emerald Twilight is still pretty damn extraordinary if you ask me. Even without all the additional Parallax context that was added to it later, Emerald Twilight is still an effective narrative, showing a superhero trying to cope with their grief, their immense personal loss, and of course, failing to do so in spectacular fashion. Seeing a hero fall into madness the way Hal Jordan does in Emerald Twilight go right off the fucking rails isn't something you see every day in this genre, and I have to say it's oddly satisfying, refreshing even. Hal Jordan is haunted by his memories, by his past, and is full of regret that begins to eat away at him. At the beginning of the story, he comes face to face with a construct of his father, Martin, and the two begin talking about their relationship. All Hal wanted was for his father to be proud of him, but he always paid more attention to his two brothers instead of him. Martin had died in a plane crash that is played out again in Hal's mind, so he never got the closure with his father he desperately needed. Hal also meets with a construct of his mother Jessica, who tells him that he needs to move on, that he can't keep carrying all of this around with him everywhere he goes, and to just focus on the good memories and not the bad, in order to heal. But Hal can't accept that. Memories are not enough, he wants more, which is why he tries to bandage his wounds, and fight back the pain by creating an artificial version of Coast City to live in, an emotional safe haven for his mind and body. In regards to wanting more power to keep that illusion alive, he feels that when Coast City was destroyed, the Guardians of the Universe left him out to dry essentially, and it's something Ganthet brings up near the end of the story, believing that the Guardians were the architects of their own destruction in many ways. They ignored Jordan in his time of need, refusing to show any compassion to him. Hal begins to think that the Green Lantern Corps is a joke, that the Guardians only use the Green Lanterns as slaves. Once they outlive their usefulness, they throw them away like yesterday's newspaper. For all of his loyalty and hard work representing the Corps for all these years, all he has ever gotten out of it as compensation is a giant crater in the ground. That's it. When Jordan begins stealing energy and the Guardians punish him for it, it only makes him want to push back more, fight even harder against their authority. Disregarding the later elements involving the entity Parallax for a minute, Hal Jordan's behavior within this story by itself may seem a little forced and contrived, all things considered. It was basically just a way for DC to set up Zero Hour and everything, turning Hal into a temporary supervillain, but I do still think there is a lot of rationale behind his actions. Emerald Twilight manages to effectively explain why he would want to go on this rampage for power. Grief is a very complicated thing. It affects everyone differently, and even if the way Hal acts in this story is taken to the extreme, crosses the line into bonkers territory in areas, again, I find it to be kind of refreshing. You don't get to see this very often. A superhero essentially saying, "Fuck it, I'm done with all this bullshit." What do you guys think of Green Lantern Emerald Twilight? Do you think it still holds up strongly? Or maybe you feel it's a little overrated? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this review, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be notified of all future videos I release. And head on over to my Patreon page to support the channel financially if you can, and gain access to various rewards. I will see you all in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.